In response to the COVID-19 Stay Home, Stay Healthy quarantine, the Bainbridge Island Metropolitan Park and Recreation District has a drawing challenge for all Bainbridge Island residents. A coloring book will be compiled this fall, both electronically and in hard copy form, for individual purchase and for use at Park District community events. If you're interested in possibly becoming a published artist, this might be your chance. First things first, let's begin by figuring out how your drawing will fit on your paper and talk briefly about artistic composition. So before we even think about what our drawing strategies are going to be, it's really important to figure out what it is that you're drawing first. And I don't mean that in terms of labeling leaves and flowers and stems. I mean that in terms of how is this visual display going to be organized onto your piece of paper. And for the purposes of this contest, we're using an 8.5 by 11 picture plane. And so when you're looking at your subject, start thinking about that arrangement. First of all, I want you to start thinking about drawing much closer than you're used to doing. Most people like to do something small in the middle of the paper. That's kind of a shy way to approach your drawing subject. Much braver to get in real close and maybe leave some of the exterior out, but get really familiar with your subject by. Another thing we'd like you to think about before we even begin is a basic rule of thirds. This isn't a lesson in composition, but it is important to think about whatever it is you draw. Try to not put your main subject smack in the middle of your paper. Much more visually interesting if you use the rule of thirds, which means the main focus of your attention in your drawing should be slightly off to the left or to the right or left thirds of the paper. And think about your horizon line and making sure that the horizon line that cuts the bottom from the top, the sky from the land, the plant from its container, the horizon line should likewise be on one of your thirds, either the bottom third or the top third, but not right in the middle. Instant way to make your drawings much more successful and much more pleasing to both you and your audience. Now, let's talk about deciding on the composition. Obviously, here we're going to be drawing flowers in a pot. And so as I decide what I want to actually be submitting for this coloring book, I decided to draw the entire piece oversized on a large sheet of paper. Once I do that, I have a nice visual representation, and indeed maybe I just want to Xerox that and bring it down to a size of 8.5 by 11. Or I can use a viewfinder. And this is a viewfinder that I made up just of little scraps of cardboard that I have in the house. Make little L's, and then you can put the viewfinder edges together and change their relationship to one another to see a different size and shape of hole on the inside. And that's representing what your picture plane is. So if we're working on an 8.5 by 11, that's approximately the relationship that we want to use. So now I can look at this big drawing and say, well, that's all nice and good, but I think it might be more interesting if I zoom in on just one smaller segment that might have a lot more interest and personality and maybe not so overwhelming. I might want to go very small. I might want to go much larger. But you can see immediately as I'm starting to move this around, both horizontally and vertically, it's a wonderful way to capture what it is that you've drawn and maybe find some magic that's already there and much stronger when it's standing by itself, where it may get lost if you've drawn too much and too big. That's one way to use the viewfinder. Another way, more simply, is to decide how you're going to engage with your subject matter to begin with, before you start drawing. This is how I'm going to be demoing today. I'm going to use this as my subject matter for contour line drawing. And one way that I'm going to begin is by looking at my subject again through my viewfinder. Instead of trying to get this to make itself fit into an 8.5 by 11 frame, I'm going to use those proportions here, and I'm going to look at my subject again both vertically and horizontally. And as I do that, I can zoom in. Again, that was one of the first rules of composition, is get close. Much more interesting when you're up close and personal. Find something, an area that's really fascinating to you, that's pleasing to the eye, has a nod to the rule of thirds composition. And once you know how you want that subject to fill your picture plane, then you're ready to begin drawing. Now, let's talk about contour line drawing. I'm going to move this out of the way, but know that I'm looking at that while you watch me draw. And I'll try to give you some handy hints of what I'm doing and why as we move forward.